The sleek black BMW came to a sputtering halt on the side of Maple Street, its engine releasing a final defeated sigh. Maya Sterling, ironically sharing a surname she'd never connect to the man about to enter her life, slammed her manicured hands against the steering wheel. "Perfect, just perfect," she hissed, her voice dripping with frustration. Maya stepped out of her luxury car, her designer heels clicking against the asphalt. At 28, she was everything society deemed successful. A sharp corporate lawyer, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her long raven black hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her green eyes burned with the intensity of someone who had clawed her way to the top. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through her contacts for her usual high-end auto service. But as fate would have it, they were booked solid for the week. Her eyes scanned the street and landed on a modest sign. "Mike's Auto Repair, honest work, fair prices." She wrinkled her nose in disgust. The building looked ordinary, paint peeling slightly from the walls, a few old cars scattered around the lot, but she had a crucial client meeting in 2 hours, and desperation was setting in. The bell above the door chimed as she entered, and that's when she first saw him. David was bent over the hood of an old pickup truck, his broad shoulders moving as he worked. His dark hair was slightly tousled, and his hands, strong, capable hands, were stained with grease. When he looked up and smiled, Maya felt something flutter in her chest for just a moment, before her prejudices kicked in. "Can I help you?" David asked, wiping his hands on a rag. His voice was warm, genuine, with just a hint of a working-class accent that made Maya's lip curl slightly. "My car broke down," she said curtly, not bothering with pleasantries. "I need it fixed now." David's smile never wavered. "Of course, let me take a look." As they walked outside, Maya couldn't help but notice how other customers in the shop looked at David with respect, even admiration. Children waved at him from passing cars, and he waved back with genuine warmth. But all Maya saw was a man in greasy coveralls, exactly the kind of person she'd spent her entire life trying to rise above. David popped the hood of Maya's BMW, his experienced eyes immediately diagnosing the problem. 20 years of working with cars, though not in the way Maya imagined, had given him an intuitive understanding of engines. "Looks like your alternator's shot," he said, straightening up. "I can have it fixed by tomorrow morning if you—" "Tomorrow?" Maya's voice pitched higher. "I said I need it now. Don't you understand English?" David's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained calm. "Ma'am, I understand your frustration, but I need to order the part and—" "Ma'am," Maya laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "Do you have any idea who I am? I'm Maya Sterling, senior partner at Morrison & Associates. I bill more in an hour than you probably make in a month." The words hit David like physical blows. Sterling. The irony wasn't lost on him. She shared his real surname, yet treated him like dirt. He watched her pace back and forth, her expensive clothes and haughty demeanor creating an invisible barrier between them. "I'm sure you're very successful," David said quietly, "but the part still needs to be ordered. I can call around, see if any other shops—" "Forget it," Maya waved him off dismissively. "Just do whatever it is you people do. I'll call a car service." "You people." The phrase hung in the air like poison. David had been called many things in his 32 years, but never had such casual dismissal stung quite so deeply. Maybe it was because, for just a moment when she'd first walked in, he'd seen something vulnerable beneath her polished exterior. Maybe it was because her beauty was undeniable, even wrapped in such ugliness of spirit. As Maya waited outside for her ride, she caught herself glancing back at David. He moved with a quiet confidence, speaking gently to an elderly customer who was clearly struggling with a repair bill. She watched him wave off the man's attempts to pay full price, saw the relief flood the customer's weathered face. Soft, Maya thought dismissively. No wonder he's stuck in a place like this. The car service arrived, a pristine black sedan that looked absurdly out of place in the humble repair shop's parking lot. As Maya slid into the back seat, she felt David's eyes on her. She didn't look back. What she didn't see was the way David stood there long after her car had disappeared, something stirring in his chest that he couldn't quite name. Challenge, intrigue, or perhaps just the simple, dangerous attraction to something, someone he knew could destroy him. 3 days later, Maya's phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Miss Sterling, this is David from Mike's Auto Repair. Your car is ready?" Maya glanced at her Cartier watch. She had exactly 30 minutes before her next meeting. "Fine, I'll be there shortly." She arrived in another car service vehicle, her mood no better than it had been days before. If anything, the inconvenience of being without her car had soured her disposition further. David was waiting in the parking lot, Having heard the sedan pull up, Maya's BMW gleamed in the afternoon sun. He'd taken special care with it, even giving it a wash and wax he hadn't charged for. "Here are your keys," David said, extending them to her. "I also topped off your fluids and checked your tire pressure. Everything should be running smooth now." Maya snatched the keys without so much as a thank you. She opened the driver's door, then paused. "How much?" $350. $350. Her voice dripped with disdain. "For that little alternator, I suppose that's a fortune to someone like you." David's hand clenched around the invoice, but his voice remained steady. "That's the fair price, ma'am. Parts and labor." Maya pulled out her wallet. Designer leather that probably cost more than some people's weekly grocery budget. She counted out the bills with deliberate slowness, as if each dollar pained her to part with. "Here," she said, practically throwing the money at him. "Try not to spend it all in one place." As she climbed into her car, David couldn't help himself. "You know," he said quietly, "money doesn't make someone better than anyone else." Maya's head snapped up, her green eyes flashing dangerously. "Excuse me, I said money doesn't—" "I heard what you said." Her voice was ice cold. "And you're right. Money doesn't make someone better, but education does, ambition does, success does. And you—" She looked him up and down with obvious distaste. "You have none of those things. You're just a mechanic, a man who'll never be anything more than a man who fixes other people's problems, because you can't fix your own life." The words landed like sledgehammer blows. David stepped back as if physically struck, watching Maya's beautiful face contort with contempt. "Know your place," she added, revving her engine. "And stay in it," the BMW roared out of the parking lot, leaving David standing alone in a cloud of exhaust and humiliation. Around him, the shop had gone quiet. Other customers and employees had heard the exchange, their faces reflecting a mixture of sympathy and second-hand embarrassment. Mike, the shop's elderly owner who'd been like a father to David since he'd started coming here, approached with concern etched on his weathered face. "Son, don't let her—" "I'm fine, Mike," David said, though his voice was rougher than usual. I'm fine." But he wasn't fine that night. Alone in his penthouse apartment, a luxury Maya couldn't even dream of, David stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights. Her words echoed in his mind. "You're just a mechanic." If only she knew the truth. 2 weeks passed before Maya's BMW betrayed her again, this time with a flat tire on the same stretch of road. She sat in her car, cursing her luck and scrolling through her phone for alternatives, but it was past 7 p.m. Most shops were closed, and Mike's Auto Repair was the only place showing lights on, swallowing her pride. What little she had when it came to admitting she needed help. Maya walked through the shop's front door. David was the only one there, working late on a complex engine rebuild. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms that Maya found herself noticing despite her disdain. When he looked up and saw her, something flickered across his face. Surprise, wariness, and something else she couldn't identify. "Flat tire," she said without preamble, dangling her keys. "Can you fix it or not?" David wiped his hands and nodded. "Let me take a look." Outside, as he jacked up her car and examined the tire, Maya found herself watching him work. There was something almost artistic about the way he moved, confident, efficient, completely absorbed in his task. She noticed things she'd missed before. The breadth of his shoulders, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead, the quiet intensity in his brown eyes. "You've got a nail in there," David said, rolling the tire toward his equipment. "I can patch it, but I'd recommend replacing it soon. This tire's pretty worn." "Just patch it," Maya said curtly. "I'm not looking for a sales pitch." David's jaw tightened, but he nodded as he worked. The silence stretched between them like a loaded gun. Finally, Maya's curiosity got the better of her. "Don't you have a family to go home to?" she asked, her tone making it clear this was more accusation than concern. David glanced up from his work. "No family, just me." "Figures," Maya muttered under her breath, but David heard her. "What's that supposed to mean?" Maya shrugged, her green eyes cold. "Men like you, you're not exactly family material. Are you no stability, no ambition, no future? What woman would want to build a life with someone who's content to stay in a place like this forever?" Each word was carefully chosen to wound, and Maya could see them hitting their target. David's hands stilled on the tire, his knuckles white against the rubber. "You don't know anything about me," he said quietly. "I know enough." Maya examined her nails with studied indifference. "I know you're 30-something and still getting your hands dirty for minimum wage. I know you'll probably be doing this same job in 20 years if you're lucky. I know that whatever dreams you might have had, you gave up on them a long time ago. David straightened slowly, fixing her with a look that made Maya suddenly aware of how alone they were in the shop. For a moment, she saw something dangerous flash in his eyes. Not violence, but something far more threatening to her carefully constructed worldview. "And what about your dreams?" David asked, his voice deceptively calm. "Besides making money and looking down on people you think are beneath you, what do you actually want from life?" The question caught Maya off guard. No one had asked her that in years, maybe ever. Her life was so carefully planned, so focused on achievement and status, that she'd never stopped to consider what would actually make her happy. "I want success," she said finally. "Real success, not this." She gestured around the shop with obvious disgust. "And does it make you happy, all that success?" Maya stared at him, unsettled by the question and by the genuine curiosity in his voice. For just a moment her mask slipped, and David saw something fragile underneath. A woman who'd armored herself so thoroughly against the world that she'd forgotten how to let anyone close. Then the moment passed, and the mask snapped back into place. "Happiness is a luxury for people who can't afford better," Maya said coldly. "Now can you hurry up? Some of us have real work to do." David finished mounting her tire in silence, each movement sharp with controlled anger. When he handed her the keys, their fingers brushed for just an instant, and Maya felt an unexpected jolt of electricity that she quickly suppressed. $40, David said. Maya threw two 20s on his workbench and walked toward her car without another word, but as she reached for the door handle, David's voice stopped her. "You know what I think?" he called out, against her better judgment. Maya turned. "I think you're scared," David said, his brown eyes holding hers steadily. "I think underneath all that expensive armor, you're just scared that if you let people close enough to see who you really are, they might walk away. So you push them away first." Maya's heart hammered against her ribs, but her voice was deadly calm when she spoke. "I think too much for a mechanic. Maybe that's your problem." She drove away into the night, but David's words followed her home, echoing in the silence of her empty penthouse apartment. Over the next month, Maya found herself driving past Mike's auto repair more often than coincidence could explain. She told herself it was simply the most direct route to several client meetings, but deep down she knew better, and somehow her car seemed to develop minor issues with suspicious frequency. A loose belt here, a mysterious rattle there, a warning light that would disappear the moment David finished looking at her engine. Each visit followed the same pattern. Maya would arrive with her walls firmly in place, trade barbs with David while he worked, pay him with barely concealed contempt, and drive away feeling oddly unsettled. But something was changing, so gradually that Maya barely noticed it at first. It started with small observations. The way David always asked the elderly customers about their grandchildren, how he never charged Mrs. Chen full price for her repairs, claiming bulk discounts that Maya suspected didn't exist. The college textbooks she glimpsed in his workspace. Advanced business theory, economics, subjects that seemed far beyond what a simple mechanic should need. "Studying for something?" Maya asked one afternoon, nodding toward a book on mergers and acquisitions. David followed her gaze and quickly closed the book. "Just interested in how businesses work. Thinking of opening your own shop?" The question came out more curious than mocking, which surprised them both. "Something like that," David said carefully. Maya found herself studying his face, looking for the dreams she'd so casually dismissed weeks before. "It takes money to start a business. Real money. More than I probably have," David finished. "Yeah, you've made that pretty clear." But instead of the usual sting of her words, Maya heard something else in her voice. Uncertainty, because the truth was, David didn't act like any mechanic she'd ever met. There was an intelligence in his eyes, a way he carried himself, that suggested depths she hadn't bothered to explore. "Why do you do this?" she asked suddenly. "Do what? Work here? In a place like this She paused, struggling with words she'd never expected to say. "You're smarter than this place." David's hands stilled on her engine. It was the first thing approaching a compliment she'd ever given him, and they both knew it. "Maybe I like it here," he said softly. "Maybe I like working with my hands, helping people, being part of a community where people actually care about each other." "Care about each other," Maya laughed, but it sounded forced. "That's just small-town naivety in the real world." "This is the real world," David interrupted, turning to face her fully. "Your world, with all its money and status and climbing over people to get ahead, that's not more real than this. It's just different." Maya opened her mouth to argue, then closed it, something in his voice, in the way he looked at her, made her feel exposed, like he could see through all her expensive clothes and sharp words to something vulnerable underneath. "I should go," she said abruptly. "How much do I owe you?" "Nothing," David said. "It was just a loose connection, took 5 minutes." Maya stared at him. "Nothing, but you, your time." "My time was freely given." They looked at each other across the small space of the garage, and for a moment, the barriers between them seemed gossamer thin. Maya felt something shift in her chest, a crack in the armor she'd spent years building. Then her phone buzzed with a text from her assistant, reminding her of a dinner meeting with potential clients. Rich, powerful men who would judge her worth by her appearance and connections, rather than her heart. The armor snapped back into place. "Well," Maya said, her voice returning to its familiar coldness, "I suppose charity is all someone like you can afford to give." She saw David flinch at the words, saw the momentary hurt in his eyes before his own walls went up, but she was already walking away, clicking across the concrete in her designer heels, running from feelings she didn't want to name. Behind her, David watched her go and wondered why the most beautiful woman he'd ever met was so determined to be cruel. What he didn't know was that Maya sat in her car for 5 full minutes before driving away, her hands shaking on the steering wheel as she fought against the unfamiliar urge to go back and apologize. The Sterling Foundation's annual charity gala was the social event of the season. 500 of the city's elite gathering to see and be seen while ostensibly raising money for local causes. Maya had attended every year since making partner, always alone, always perfectly dressed, always playing the part of the successful, untouchable ice queen. This year felt different as she moved through the crowd in her emerald silk gown, accepting compliments on her appearance and discussing merger deals over champagne. Her thoughts kept drifting to a pair of brown eyes and grease-stained hands. Maya. The voice belonged to Richard Blackstone, a real estate mogul she'd dated briefly the year before, rich, handsome in a generic way, and about as emotionally deep as a puddle. "You look stunning as always, and Richard..." Maya accepted his kiss on the cheek with practiced grace. "How are the developments in the Harbour District coming along?" "Beautifully. We broke ground last month, of course. We had to relocate some of the existing businesses, a few auto shops, some small restaurants, nothing important." "Auto shops?" Maya's attention sharpened. "Where are they relocating to?" Richard shrugged, already bored with the topic. "Who knows? Who cares? Progress waits for no one, especially not some grease monkey." "Don't!" The word came out sharper than Maya intended. Richard looked surprised. "Don't what?" "Don't call them that." Maya wasn't sure why she was defending mechanics, defending David, but the words were out before she could stop them. "Since when do you care about blue-collar workers?" Richard laughed. "You're even more ruthless than I am when it comes to business." Was she? Maya looked around the glittering ballroom, at all these people in their expensive clothes, drinking expensive wine, talking about expensive things. When had this become her world? When had she become someone who looked down on honest work and good hearts? "Excuse me?" Maya murmured, needing air. She stepped onto the hotel's terrace, the cool night air a relief after the stifling atmosphere inside. The city sprawled below her, millions of lights representing millions of lives, lives she'd trained herself not to think about when making business decisions. Beautiful view. Maya turned to find herself facing a distinguished older man she didn't recognize, well-dressed but not flashy, with kind eyes and silver hair. "Yes, it is," Maya agreed politely. "I'm Michael Sterling," the man said, extending his hand, "though most people call me Mike." Maya shook his hand. Noting the calluses, "Sterling, are we related?" Mike chuckled. "I doubt it. It's a common enough name, though I'd be proud to claim a successful lawyer as family. What do you do, Mr. Sterling?" "I own a small auto repair shop, nothing glamorous, but it pays the bills and lets me sleep at night." Maya's heart stopped. "Mike's Auto Repair. You know it?" Mike looked surprised and pleased. "Don't tell me you've been one of our customers." Maya stared at him, pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. This distinguished gentleman in the expensive suit was the same Mike who owned the shop where David worked with obvious respect and affection from everyone around him. Yes, I've had some work done there." Mike's smile widened. "Then you've probably met David. Wonderful young man. He's like a son to me." "A son?" "Oh yes, been coming to the shop for years now, ever since he moved to the city. Started as a customer, but he had such a natural talent with engines, such a way with people, that I started letting him help out. Now I can't imagine the place without him." Maya's mind raced. "Since he moved to the city from where?" "Oh, somewhere back east. He doesn't talk much about his past, but I get the impression he comes from money. Real money, the way he carries himself, his education. But something happened. Some falling out with his family, I think. Pride's a terrible thing sometimes. The terrace seemed to spin around Maya. David came from money, had an education. Then why was he working in a repair shop, letting her treat him like dirt? Are you all right, dear? Mike asked, concern in his voice. You look pale. I need to go, Maya stammered. It was lovely meeting you, Mr. Sterling. She fled back into the ballroom, her mind reeling. Everything she thought she knew about David had just been turned upside down. But if he came from money, if he had options, then why? Maya barely remembered the rest of the evening. She smiled and nodded and played her part, but her thoughts were consumed by brown eyes and gentle hands and words that suddenly carried new meaning. Maybe I like working with my hands, helping people, being part of a community where people actually care about each other. Had David chosen that life? Chosen simplicity over wealth, service over status, genuine connection over social climbing? And if so, what did that make her? Maya couldn't sleep. She lay in her king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling of her penthouse apartment, Mike's words echoing in her head. David came from money, real money, but he'd chosen to work in a repair shop, to help people, to live simply. Why, at 3 in the morning, she gave up on sleep and drove through the empty streets to Mike's auto repair. She wasn't sure what she was looking for. Answers, maybe, or just a way to quiet the questions screaming in her head. The shop was dark except for a single light in the back office. Maya parked across the street, intending to just look to maybe understand something about the man who'd gotten so deeply under her skin. But then she saw him. David sat at an old wooden desk, papers spread before him, his dark hair falling across his forehead as he worked. Even from a distance, Maya could see the intensity of his concentration. He looked different somehow, more than just a mechanic fixing an engine. There was something almost executive about his posture, his focus. Before she could talk herself out of it, Maya crossed the street and knocked on the shop's glass door. David looked up, startled, then confused when he saw her. He glanced at the clock, 3:17 a.m., before getting up to unlock the door. Maya, what are you... Is everything okay? It was the first time he'd used her first name, and hearing it in his voice sent an unexpected shiver through her. I couldn't sleep, she said honestly. I was driving and saw the light. David stepped aside to let her in, and Maya found herself in the familiar space that looked different in the dim lighting, more intimate somehow. Working late? She asked, nodding toward his desk. David's expression became guarded. Just paperwork. Maya moved closer, and David quickly gathered the papers, but not before she caught a glimpse of what looked like financial reports, business plans, documents far too sophisticated for a simple repair shop. David, her voice was softer than it had ever been with him. I met someone tonight, Mike Sterling. He told me some interesting things about you. David went very still. Such as that you come from money, that you chose to work here. Maya studied his face, looking for truth in his eyes. Why? For a long moment, David didn't answer. Then he sank into his desk chair, suddenly looking exhausted. Because I was tired of people only seeing dollar signs when they looked at me, he said quietly. Tired of never knowing if someone cared about me or my bank account. Tired of a world where everything was a transaction, and nothing was real. Maya felt something twist in her chest. So you came here. So I came here. And I found something I'd never had before. Genuine relationships, honest work, people who valued me for what I could do, not what I could buy. But you let me. Maya's voice trailed off as the full weight of her cruelty hit her. God, you let me say all those horrible things to you, and you knew I was everything you were trying to escape. David looked up at her, and Maya saw pain in his eyes. Not fresh pain, but the deep old kind that comes from repeated wounds. You made it very clear what you thought of people like me, he said, people you considered beneath you. But you're not, Maya began, then stopped. Because that was the problem, wasn't it? She judged him entirely based on his job. His clothes, his social status. The fact that he actually had money didn't change the ugliness of her behavior. It only made it more obvious. I'm exactly what you saw, David said gently. A man who works with his hands, who finds meaning in simple things, who believes that how you treat people matters more than how much money you have. The money doesn't change any of that. Maya sank into the old chair across from his desk, feeling the weight of her own actions pressing down on her. I was awful to you. Yes, David said simply. You were. The honesty of it hit Maya like a physical blow. No sugarcoating, no polite deflection. Just truth. Why didn't you tell me, she whispered. Tell you what, that I had money, would it have mattered? Would you have suddenly found my work valuable, my life worthwhile, just because I had a trust fund? David leaned forward, his brown eyes intense. Don't you see, that would have made it even worse? Maya did see. If she'd treated him well only after learning about his wealth, it would have proved every cynical thing he believed about people like her. I don't know how to, she began, then stopped. How to what? Apologize. Make amends. Become a different person entirely. Maya? David's voice was gentle but firm. It was gentle. What are you doing here, really? It was the question she'd been avoiding even in her own mind. What was she doing here, at 3 in the morning, in a mechanic's shop, facing a man she'd spent weeks treating like dirt? I don't know, she admitted. I can't stop thinking about you. The words hung between them like a confession. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Maya had never felt more exposed, sitting in that dim repair shop at 3 in the morning, having just admitted to the man she'd repeatedly humiliated that she couldn't get him out of her head. David studied her face, looking for the catch, the angle, the manipulation he'd learned to expect from her world, his old world. You can't stop thinking about me, he repeated slowly. The mechanic you wouldn't be caught dead with, the man with no ambition, no future, no value beyond his ability to fix your car. Each word was Maya's own, thrown back at her with surgical precision. She flinched but didn't look away. I was wrong, she whispered. About which part, my worth as a human being or just my bank balance? The question was a knife between her ribs. Maya had built her entire identity around success, status, and superiority. Now faced with the wreckage of her own cruelty, she felt that identity crumbling. About all of it, she said, her voice breaking. David, I don't know who I am anymore. It was the most honest thing she'd said in years, maybe ever. David saw the crack in her armor widening, revealing someone vulnerable and lost beneath all that polished perfection. Who do you want to be? He asked quietly. Maya looked around the shop at the honest tools, the straightforward work, the evidence of David's care for his customers visible in every corner. Then she looked at David himself, really looked at him. Perhaps for the first time, he was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with money or status. Beautiful in his competence, his kindness, his quiet strength. Beautiful in the way he'd endured her cruelty without becoming cruel himself. I want to be someone you could respect, she said. David's breath caught in all their encounters, through all her cutting words and condescending looks. He'd seen glimpses of someone real beneath Maya's facade. Now with her walls down and her vulnerability showing, he saw her clearly. She was terrified. Maya? He stood and moved around the desk, stopping just in front of her chair. You want honesty? Here's honesty. I've thought about you every day since we met. Not because of your success or your looks or your money. Because underneath all that armor, I see someone who's as lost as I was before I found this place. Maya looked up at him, tears she'd been fighting finally spilling over. I don't know how to be different. Yes, you do. David reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. You're being different right now. The touch of his calloused thumb against her skin sent electricity through Maya's entire body. She leaned into his hand without thinking, desperate for genuine human contact after years of keeping everyone at arm's length. David, The words were cut off as David's phone rang. Shattering the intimate moment, he glanced at the caller ID and sighed. I have to take this, it's complicated. Maya watched him walk to the other side of the shop, speaking in low tones. She couldn't make out the words, but she caught phrases, merger, board meeting, quarterly reports, when he returned. His expression was guarded again. Work, Maya asked, something like that. David sat back down, but the spell between them had been broken. Maya, what happens now? You go back to your penthouse, your law firm, your world of status and success. I stay here. We're from different universes. Are we? Maya challenged. You just proved we're not so different. You had money, status, success. You gave it up, maybe. Maybe I could too. David shook his head. You can't give up who you are for someone else. I didn't leave my old life for anyone but myself. I left because I was miserable, because I was empty, because I needed to find something real. Maya stared at him, understanding dawning. And you found it here. I found it here, David confirmed. But Maya, you have to find your own version of here. You have to figure out what's real for you. Maya stood, suddenly needing distance from his penetrating gaze. What if I don't know how? What if I've been playing a role for so long that I've forgotten who I really am underneath? Then you figure it out, David said simply. But you figure it out for you. Not for me or anyone else. Maya turned back to face him, and David saw something in her green eyes he'd never seen before. Determination mixed with fear, hope wrestling with despair. "David," she said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks, "I need to know something. If I were different, really different, would you— She couldn't finish the question, but David understood. "Maya," he said gently, "ask me that question when you know who you really are. Not who you think I want you to be, but who you actually are. Then we'll see." It wasn't the answer Maya had hoped for, but it was the answer she needed. As she drove home through the pre-dawn darkness, David's words echoed in her mind. "You have to figure out what's real for you." For the first time in her adult life, Maya had no idea what that meant, but she was determined to find out. The next morning, Maya called in sick to work, something she hadn't done in over 3 years. Instead of her usual power suit, she put on jeans and a simple sweater, clothes she hadn't worn since law school. Then she did something that would have been unthinkable just weeks before. She volunteered at the community center downtown. "I'd like to help," she told the surprised coordinator. "However I can." They put her in the literacy program, helping adults learn to read. Maya found herself sitting across from Maria, a middle-aged woman who cleaned office buildings at night and was struggling to help her daughter with homework. "I just want to read her bedtime stories," Maria said, her eyes bright with determination. "Like my mama never could for me." Maya felt something crack open in her chest. When was the last time she'd wanted something so pure, so selfless? When was the last time she'd thought about anyone's needs beyond her own? Over the following weeks, Maya's life took on a strange double quality. During the day, she still wore her suits, still practiced law, still moved through her familiar world of corporate deals and billable hours. But in the evenings and on weekends, she found herself drawn to a different existence. She volunteered at the community center. She helped Maria and others like her. Discovering a satisfaction in their progress that was deeper than any courtroom victory, she started shopping at local businesses instead of high-end boutiques, talking to the owners, learning their stories, and she found herself driving past Mike's auto repair almost daily, though she never stopped. She would see David through the windows, talking with customers, working on engines, living the authentic life she was still learning to understand. But she didn't approach. Not yet. His words echoed constantly. "Ask me that question when you know who you really are." 3 weeks into her new routine, Maya was leaving the community center when she ran into Richard Blackstone. "Maya," his voice carried that familiar tone of entitled familiarity, "I've been calling you about dinner, about the harbor project." "I'm not interested, Richard." He blinked, clearly taken aback by her directness. "Not interested in dinner or the project?" "Either, both." Maya shifted her volunteer bag to her other shoulder, suddenly seeing Richard clearly for the first time. Handsome. Yes, successful, certainly, but empty in a way that made her feel hollow, just looking at him. "What's gotten into you?" Richard's voice took on an edge. "First you defend blue-collar workers at the gala, now you're— What is this place?" He looked at the community center with obvious disgust. "It's where I volunteer," Maya said simply. Richard laughed, a cold, ugly sound. "Volunteer, Maya. You're a senior partner at Morrison & Associates. You bill $600 an hour. What are you doing wasting your time with? These people. These people." The phrase hit Maya like an echo of her own past cruelty. How many times had she used similar language about David, about anyone she considered beneath her notice? "These people have names," Maya said quietly. "They have dreams. Families, struggles that matter just as much as yours or mine. Since when do you care about other people's struggles?" Richard's voice was incredulous. "You're the most ambitious, most ruthlessly focused person I know. It's what I admired about you." Maya stared at him, seeing herself reflected in his words like a funhouse mirror. Was that really who she'd been? Ruthless, focused only on herself, admirable only for her ambition? "Maybe I'm changing," she said. "People don't change, Maya, not really. This is just some phase, some temporary guilt or whatever. You'll get bored with playing saint and come back to reality. And if I don't," Richard's smile was condescending, "then you'll have wasted one of the sharpest legal minds I've ever seen on people who can't even pronounce litigation." Maya felt anger flare in her chest, not at Richard but at herself, because she recognized his words, his tone, his casual dismissal of human worth. It was like listening to a recording of her own voice. "Goodbye, Richard," she said firmly. "Maya, don't be ridiculous." But Maya was already walking away, leaving Richard standing on the sidewalk, confused and calling after her. That night, alone in her apartment, Maya looked at her reflection in her bedroom mirror. Same face, same green eyes, same dark hair, but something fundamental had shifted. The woman looking back at her was still successful, still intelligent, still strong, but no longer cruel. The realization hit her like lightning. She was becoming someone she could respect. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Maya, it's David. Mike told me you've been volunteering at the community center. I wanted you to know. I think that's wonderful. Maya stared at the message, her heart hammering. He'd been thinking about her too, watching her transformation from a distance. The way she'd been watching his authentic life, she typed and deleted a dozen responses before settling on, "Thank you, it's teaching me who I want to be." His response came quickly. "And who is that?" Maya looked at her reflection again, seeing not the ruthless lawyer or the ice queen, but a woman learning to care about something beyond herself. Someone worthy of the man who's been patient enough to let me figure it out. This time, David's response took longer. When it came, it made Maya's breath catch. "Would you like to have coffee sometime, somewhere neutral, just talk?" Maya typed back without hesitation. Yes. They met at a small cafe neither of them had been to before. Neutral ground, as David had suggested. Maya arrived first. Choosing a corner table where they could talk privately, she'd spent an hour getting ready, changing clothes 3 times before settling on dark jeans, a soft blue sweater, and minimal makeup. The goal wasn't to impress, but to be genuine. David walked in precisely on time and Maya's breath caught breath. She'd seen him countless times in his work clothes, but today he wore dark slacks and a button-down shirt that emphasized his broad shoulders. He looked expensive, she realized, like someone who belonged in her world, even though she now understood he'd chosen to step out of it. "Hi," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Hi." Maya's voice was softer than usual, none of her typical sharpness. They ordered coffee for him, tea for her, and then sat in the kind of awkward silence that follows months of complicated history. "So," David said finally, "Maria Santos says you're her favorite tutor." Maya looked up, surprised. "You know Maria? Her son brings their car to the shop sometimes." She mentioned the lawyer who's been helping her learn to read. David's smile was gentle. "She didn't realize I knew you, but she couldn't stop talking about how patient you are, how you never make her feel stupid for not knowing things." Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks. "She's an incredible woman, works 3 jobs to support her family, but she still makes time to learn so she can help her daughter with school." "That must be different for you," David observed, "working with people who don't have much money." Maya met his eyes. "It is, but not in the way you might think. They're not different because they're poor, David. They're just real. They don't have the luxury of pretending to be someone they're not." David nodded slowly. "Unlike the people in your usual world. Unlike the person I was in my usual world," Maya corrected. "David, I owe you an apology, a real one. Not just for the things I said, but for the person I was when I said them." "Maya, please let me finish." Maya took a shaky breath. "I was cruel to you, not just rude or dismissive, but actively cruel. I made assumptions about your worth as a human being based on your job, your clothes, your social status. I treated you like you were invisible, like you didn't matter." David watched her face as she spoke, seeing the genuine pain there. "The thing is," Maya continued, "I didn't treat you that way because I believed you were worthless. I treated you that way because some part of me recognized that you were everything I wasn't. Genuine, kind, connected to something real, and that terrified me." "Why did it terrify you?" Maya stared into her tea, gathering courage. "Because I've spent my entire adult life building an identity around being better than other people, smarter, more successful, more valuable. If people like you, people with genuine goodness, were actually worth something, then what did that make me?" The honesty of it hung between them like a bridge. David reached across the table and gently covered her hand with his. "It made you human," he said quietly. "Just human, like everyone else." Maya looked down at their joined hands, her pale manicured fingers against his work-roughened palm, and felt something settle in her chest. "I'm trying to figure out how to be different," she said. "Really different. Not just volunteering to impress you or anyone else. But David, I don't know if I can change enough. I don't know if I can become someone good enough for someone like you." David was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her knuckles. "Maya," he said finally, "I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you weeks ago." Maya's heart clenched. "What?" David pulled his hand back and reached into his jacket pocket, withdrawing a business card. He placed it on the table between them. Maya picked it up and felt the world tilt. David Sterling, CEO, Sterling Automotive Group. Sterling Automotive, Maya whispered, recognition dawning. The luxury car dealership empire, that's worth hundreds of millions. Closer to billions, actually, David said quietly. Maya, I'm not just from money, I am the money. Sterling Automotive is my family's company. I've been the CEO for 5 years. Maya stared at him, her mind reeling. But the shop, Mike Sterling is my grandfather. He started with one small repair shop 60 years ago and built it into an empire. But he never forgot where he came from, never forgot the value of honest work. When I was drowning in corporate politics and gold diggers and people who only saw dollar signs, he suggested I spend some time at his original shop, get my hands dirty, remember what real work feels like. So you've been lying to me this whole time? No, David's voice was firm. I've been more honest with you than anyone in my life. Everything I told you about wanting genuine relationships, about being tired of people who only cared about money, that was all true. The work I do at the shop, the person I am there, that's the real me. The CEO thing is just what I have to be to keep the family business running. Maya set the business card down with shaking hands. David, I don't understand. If you're a billionaire CEO, why did you let me treat you like that? Why didn't you tell me who you really were? David's eyes were sad but not surprised. Because of exactly what you're doing right now. What am I doing? You're looking at me differently, talking to me differently. 5 minutes ago you were worried you weren't good enough for me. Now you're recalculating my worth based on my net worth. Maya opened her mouth to protest, then closed it, because he was right. Learning about his wealth had changed something in how she saw him, and they both knew it. That's not, she began. Maya, David said gently, the question isn't whether you're good enough for a billionaire. The question is whether you can love the mechanic, because that's who I really am, regardless of what my bank account says. Maya stared at him across the small cafe table, understanding finally dawning. This wasn't about money or status or social climbing. This was about whether she could truly value someone for their character, rather than their achievements. I don't know, she whispered. It was the most honest answer she'd ever given, and David respected her for it. Then figure it out, he said. Standing. But Maya, figure it out for the right reasons. He left her sitting there with his business card and a choice that would define who she really was. Maya didn't sleep that night. She paced her penthouse apartment, David's business card in her hand, her mind spinning with the implications of everything she'd learned. David Sterling, CEO of Sterling Automotive Group, one of the most powerful men in the industry, and she'd treated him like dirt because she thought he was beneath her. But that wasn't the part that kept her awake. The part that kept her awake was his final question. Can you love the mechanic? Maya walked to her floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out at the city lights. Seeing her reflection ghosted in the glass, who was she really? The successful lawyer who climbed over others to reach the top, the volunteer who was learning to care about people less fortunate, the woman who'd fallen for a man she thought was poor, or the woman now struggling with the knowledge that he was richer than she could ever dream of being. That dawn, Maya made a decision. She dressed carefully, not in a power suit but in simple professional clothes, and drove to Sterling Automotive Group's headquarters. The building was impressive, 50 stories of glass and steel, the kind of corporate monument Maya usually admired, but today it looked cold, impersonal, nothing like the warm community of Mike's auto repair. Maya took the elevator to the executive floor, her heart hammering. She'd rehearsed what she wanted to say, but now, surrounded by marble and mahogany and the trappings of extreme wealth, her carefully planned words seemed inadequate. David's assistant was polite but firm. I'm sorry, but Mr. Sterling is in back-to-back meetings all day. If you'd like to schedule an appointment. Tell him Maya is here, Maya interrupted. Tell him it's about his grandfather's shop. The assistant made the call, spoke quietly into the phone, then looked up in surprise. He'll see you now, conference room C, just down the hall. Maya found David standing at a wall of windows, looking out at the city below. He wore an expensive charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, his hair styled, every inch the powerful CEO. But when he turned to face her, his eyes held the same warmth she'd come to know at the shop. Maya, I wasn't sure you'd come. I wasn't sure either. Maya stayed near the door, suddenly uncertain. David, I need to ask you something. All right? Yesterday at the coffee shop, when you told me who you really are, were you testing me? David was quiet for a moment, considering, maybe I was testing myself. What do you mean? David moved away from the windows. Closer to her. Maya, I've been attracted to you since the day we met. But I've also been attracted to women before who only wanted me for my money. I needed to know. If you could care about David the mechanic, then maybe you could love David the man, regardless of what else comes with him. Maya felt tears prick her eyes. And if I couldn't, then I'd know you weren't the woman I hoped you were becoming. The honesty of it was devastating and beautiful at the same time. Maya looked around the opulent conference room, then back at David. This is who you really are too, isn't it? Not just the mechanic, but this, the CEO. The billionaire, the man with more power and money than most countries. It's part of who I am, David agreed. But Maya, I need you to understand something. This, he gestured around the room. This is what I do to take care of the people I love, my employees, my family, the community my grandfather built his business to serve. But the shop, working with my hands, helping people directly, that's what feeds my soul, Maya understood then. David wasn't two different people. He was one complex man trying to balance responsibility with authenticity, duty with desire. David, she said, stepping closer, I came here to tell you that I have my answer. Do you? Maya looked into his brown eyes, seeing all of him now, the mechanic and the CEO, the man who fixed cars and the man who ran an empire, the person who'd endured her cruelty and the one who'd been patient enough to let her grow. I love the mechanic, she said quietly. I love the man who took time to explain things to Mrs. Chen, who never charged fair prices because he cared more about helping than profiting. I love the person who saw something worth saving in a cruel, ambitious woman and gave her space to become someone better. David's breath caught. And the CEO? Maya smiled, and for the first time in months, it reached her eyes. I respect the CEO. I admire what you've built, what you've accomplished. But David, I fell in love with the man who got grease under his fingernails and never complained when I treated him terribly, because he understood I was treating him terribly because I was afraid of what he represented, which was everything I wanted to be but didn't know how to become: genuine, kind, real. David stepped closer, close enough that Maya could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. Maya, he said softly, I have one more question. What? Will you let me take you to dinner? Not as the CEO of Sterling Automotive, not as the mechanic at Mike's shop, but as David, just David. The man who's been falling in love with you since the day you first insulted my intelligence. Maya laughed. A real laugh, bright and unguarded. Yes, but I have one condition. What's that? Can we go somewhere simple, somewhere real? I've had enough of fancy restaurants and impressing people for a while. David's smile was radiant. I know just the place. 6 months later, Maya pulled her BMW into the familiar parking lot of Mike's Auto Repair, but this time she wasn't there as a customer. She was there as someone who belonged. David looked up from the engine he was working on and smiled. The same warm, genuine smile that had first caught her attention, back when she'd been too proud and scared to recognize it for what it was. How was court? He asked, wiping his hands on a rag. We won, Maya said, but without her old arrogance. Mrs. Rodriguez gets to keep her house. The bank tried to foreclose illegally. Maya had left Morrison and Associates 3 months ago, shocking her former colleagues by opening a small practice focused on helping people who couldn't afford high-powered legal representation. Her income had dropped dramatically, but her satisfaction had soared. That's wonderful, David said, pulling her into his arms despite his greasy coveralls. Maya didn't care about the grease anymore. How was your day? She asked, settling into their comfortable routine. Good, Mr. Patterson's truck is finally running again, and Maria picked up her car. She wanted me to tell you thank you for helping her son with his college applications. Maya smiled. Maria had not only learned to read, but had gone back to school herself. Inspired partly by Maya's encouragement, their friendship had become one of the most genuine relationships in Maya's life. David, Maya said, looking around the shop that had become as familiar to her as her own apartment, I have something to tell you. David raised an eyebrow. Good something or bad something? Good something, I think. Maya took a breath. Richard Blackstone called me today. David's expression darkened slightly. Richard had been persistent in his attempts to win Maya back. Unable to understand her transformation, he offered me a partnership in his real estate firm. Said he'd pay me 3 times what I'm making now if I'd come work for him and, quote, stop this ridiculous phase of helping poor people. What did you tell him? Maya grinned. I told him that helping people isn't a phase, it's who I am now, and that I'd rather be happy than rich. David stared at her. Why, you said that to Richard Blackstone? I said more than that. Maya's eyes sparkled with mischief. I told him that I'd learned the difference between having money and being wealthy, that I'd learned it from a mechanic who taught me that your worth isn't measured by your bank account, but by how you treat the people around you. David's expression softened. Maya, I'm not finished, Maya said, reaching into her purse. I also told him that I was hoping to become part of a family that understood real value. She pulled out a small velvet box and held it out to David. David stared at the box, then at her, his mouth falling open slightly. Maya, are you David Sterling? Maya said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Will you marry me? David laughed, a sound of pure joy that echoed through the shop. You're proposing to me in a garage while I'm covered in grease. I'm proposing to you in the place where I learned who you really are, where I learned who I really am. Maya's eyes were bright with tears. David, you asked me once if I could love the mechanic. The answer is yes, I love the mechanic, I love the CEO, I love the man who was patient enough to let me figure out how to be worthy of someone like you. David took the box with shaking hands and opened it. Inside was a simple gold band, not flashy or expensive, but elegant and timeless. Maya, he said softly, you know I was planning to propose to you, right? I've had a ring for weeks. Were you? Maya grinned. Well, I beat you to it, so what do you say? Instead of answering with words, David kissed her. It was a kiss that held months of patience, forgiveness, growth, and love. A kiss that tasted like new beginnings and second chances. When they finally broke apart, David rested his forehead against hers. Yes, he whispered. Yes to all of it. To you, to us, to whatever comes next. Around them, the shop continued its daily rhythm. Honest work, genuine relationships, people caring for each other in simple, profound ways. It was the life Maya had once scorned and now cherished, the world she'd almost missed because she'd been too proud to see its value. As David slipped the ring onto his finger, Maya thought about the journey that had brought them here. She'd started as a woman who measured worth in dollars and status, who'd treated a good man terribly because she couldn't see past her own prejudices. But love, real love, had taught her something invaluable. The richest life isn't measured by what you accumulate, but by what you give, and the most precious things, kindness, authenticity, genuine connection, can't be bought at any price. Maya Sterling, she'd be taking his name for real this time, had finally learned the difference between being successful and being valuable, and in a small auto repair shop, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and the sounds of honest work, she'd found the greatest treasure of all, a love built not on what they had, but on who they'd chosen to become. So, David said, grinning as he admired his ring, what do we do now? Maya looked around the shop, at the life they'd built together, at the community they'd become part of, and smiled. Now, she said, we get back to work. And in the gentle chaos of Mike's auto repair, as David returned to his engine and Maya helped Mrs. Chen with her paperwork, they did exactly that. Two people who'd found each other across the divide of pride and prejudice, building a life together based on the simple, revolutionary idea that love isn't about what someone can give you, but about who you become when you're with them. A story of transformation where true wealth is measured not in dollars, but in the courage to see beyond surface judgments and find the authentic person beneath. Maya learned that the greatest luxury isn't what money can buy.